So welcome everyone to our Labor Forward. This might be the first one in a couple of months because I think we suspended some during summer. So welcome. My name is Alexia Kulwiec. I am faculty here at the School for Workers. And today is somewhat interesting. I get to interview my colleague, full Professor Armando Ibarra, who's also with the School for Workers, as well as I believe it's Chicanx and Latinx studies now at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And our topic today is really quite broad. It's really talking about the immigrant workforce here in Wisconsin and in the region and the impacts they have. And Armando's reminded me that maybe part of the reason for the topic right now is Hispanic Heritage Month. But in addition, my God, it's just so topical and there's so much going on, right? So Armando, first I'll just ask you to introduce yourself a little bit more, including your work in the immigrant community.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, all, and welcome to our conversation here. I'm always amazed by the work and the discussions that I have with my colleague, Professor Alexia Kulwiec, who has also taught me so much about labor law and about other 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 law that pertains to workers in general. Alexia has been a key partner in some of the projects that we've undertaken in Wisconsin with workers, and also a key investigator and author in some of the reports that we produced on working people here in Wisconsin. So again, my name's Armando. I'm a professor here at the School for Workers. Quite frankly, I came to Wisconsin because of the School for Workers and its mission of labor education and the Wisconsin idea. My work itself centers on labor rights, immigrant justice, and the lived experiences of Latino, both immigrant and non-immigrant workers across Wisconsin. And over the years, I've collaborated with multiple community organizations, NGOs, and also some state agencies. And the center of those collaborations really has been to document and support the essential contributions of workers to our state's economy and society.
Great. So with that background, I think, and thank you for your kind comments. Let's go ahead and start talking about that, right? Because that's really the central thing we wanted to talk about today is how much of a role immigrant workers play in Wisconsin and in the region generally, maybe in particular industries. So as we think about sort of attacks happening today, right, it's really important, I think, to recognize and discuss the contributions that are being made. So that's a really broad question or comment. So just run with it. And why don't you explain for us a little bit more about immigrants' role in our economy locally, and in the workforce, and in industry? Um, thank you.
Sure. So, I mean, I want to begin our conversation by just grounding us in some key facts, right? Some key facts that come directly from our data gathering through the census. So,
Mhm.
right now, the census tells us that today there's roughly 500,000 Latinos in the state of Wisconsin. So that's about 8% of the total population, making them the second largest ethnic and or racial group in the state. Let me start with that fact. Um, there are about, I don't know, about 187 to 200,000 of these Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, or whatever label is used to describe this population are foreign born, right? And about 30% of that population, give or take, is an unauthorized or people that are here with an unauthorized immigration status, right? So those numbers start to paint the picture of what this community looks like in the state of Wisconsin. I also have to throw out there that about half of Latino immigrants, right, are naturalized U.S. citizens, that they
And is
actively
that in Wisconsin or generally, if I
in
can?
Wisconsin. So
Okay.
in Wisconsin, about 50% of Latinos are, well, 47 to 50% of our Latinos are as immigrant Latinos are estimated to be naturalized U.S. citizens. And they actively participate in civic life and they also contribute to our communities as well.
Mhm.
When we step down to the youth, when we look at youth in Wisconsin, we know that in the K through 12 public school system, there is 114,000 plus Latinx and Latina students. These are young people who self-identify as Latinx or Latina students, right? So that's 14% of the total population of the K through 12 school system. So if we look at the overall population, right, of uh, of of 8% of the total population being Latino, and the schools is 14% of the overall total population, that really gives us an inside look into what the future demographic profile of our state will be. Um, this population is fairly young, this Latino population, which is, about 25 years of age is the average age of Latinas and Latinos in comparisons to 35% for the dominant group. So it's 10 years younger, right? So that in itself gives us another clue as to this demographic transformation that we're undergoing as a state, and they work in higher rates. They're employed in higher rates for that age range of employee, that age of employment rate than the dominant group as well. So
I
they're
mean, overall population, more of them are employed currently than
Yes,
in the
when
general
we do it,
population? Is that what that,
yes.
okay.
So when we do a comparison of people that are employed or looking for employment, Latinos and Latino immigrants are employed in higher numbers
Got it.
percentage-wise than the dominant group. Uh, but they also have this precarious placement of having about a 34% poverty rate. So what we're telling us, we have a largely employed population that has a high poverty rate amongst its population as well,
Yeah.
telling us, indicating that there is this working but poor, really population that is part of the Latino overall group. Um, so that's just some broad numbers of who Latinos are in Wisconsin. Um, in a nutshell, if I was to say the average Latino in Wisconsin was is more than likely younger, right? More than likely a parent, more than likely employed, and high probabilities that they were born in Wisconsin. So there are more people that consider themselves Latinos that were born in Wisconsin, that were born in another state in our country or in another country itself. That type of narrative is often overlooked or understudied or undervalued when we have these conversations about the impacts of Latinos in Wisconsin or across the
Mhm.
country. So they're generational impacts. They're not just impacts that happen
Yeah.
with this new wave of newcomers that are here, but Latinos in Wisconsin have been present for at least 100 years, and this is documented in this Wisconsin Historical Society trade book that was produced by Sergio Gonzalez about Mexicans in Wisconsin. It's a beautiful book that people should look at. Now, when we look at this, we look at those numbers, and I know that we 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 often want to know, where are these folks working? Why are they so important, right? And
Yeah, so before you get there though, because that was going to be my follow-up is where
okay,
are they all working, right? But I think that I want to just stop and reflect that on those factors alone, being born in Wisconsin, having a family, being part of the social fabric, having lives and contributing, those all sound like really positive things, and they are very much a part of the community here. And yes, I think that particularly with some of the narratives that we hear lately, it's just important to take a step back and recognize that. So I really appreciate that starting point. Um, Now I'll let you continue. And the follow-up point, which is, so to me, that just means their role in society and their communities and their families are so valuable. But there's also, in fact, the work that they're producing that
Sure.
impacts the economy and that, in, not just in Wisconsin, but products that are shipped elsewhere, right? So tell me more about the work they're doing here.
Yeah. So let me take this step back again, and
Hmm.
again, let's recognize this really important point that you made right now, Alexia, that Latinos are much more than agents in the economy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They are Latinos are Americans, and they are a part of the social fabric of our contemporary America, but they are also a part of our history and are definitely a part of our future. And I think this is something that President Johnson was trying to address in 1968, right? In 1968, when he issued this proclamation that established the National Hispanic Heritage Week back then, which then was formed into Hispanic Heritage Month. And it was a point to acknowledge the cultural, economic, and civic contributions of Hispanic Americans at that point in history, noting their achievements in business, science, government, the arts, and as well as their valor in battle, right? So you have in those eras, you have, World War One, World War Two, War, and other confrontations where there was uh, large numbers of Latinos that were serving, that were coming back to a society that was still battling with segregation and discrimination. And so, to step up their game, and so those civil rights movements really place this narrative at the forefront of decision maker, which in this case was President Johnson's, and he declared, um, September 15th to October, or the week that eventually became Hispanic Heritage Month. Um, and it
So what is that
reminded,
month now? We're in it, yes?
yes, we are. It started the 15th of September, and it reminds us really of the Latino contributions have long been recognized, right?
Yes.
And this recognition must also be matched with rights, representation, and ultimately respect. And I think that ultimately respect, that would add dignity as well, is the conversation that we're really talking about today here. Now, the
Yeah.
contributions to Wisconsin's economy are are
Let me
enormous.
just, if I can stop for one
Sure.
second, 'cause based on what you've said. So I think it is really important. And when we listen to debate today, say on the immigrant workforce or
Yeah.
immigration numbers, et cetera, we act as though everybody has just crossed the border today, right? Or I don't act that way. I hope I don't. But a lot of news stories, et cetera. And so just as I stopped you a moment ago on something else, I just wanted to thank you for raising that. And so even as Johnson was involved in civil rights movement, which we think about in terms of Title VII and sort of like um, rights of people of color and that kind of thing, that he also recognized the tremendous, and of course it comes back to every industry that Latino immigrants were involved in um, decades and decades and hundreds of years ago here, right? And so I I think that that is a really important point, and your point that many Latinos in Wisconsin were born here, right? I mean, this country was founded as the melting pot, right? And so this sort of, it feels like we're going backwards a bit in thinking about that issue um, in many ways, but in terms of sort of maybe popular narrative. But I think so. It's good to just recognize they were really important in communities and in art and in work and all that. And I appreciate your comment on
We had a program with at the School for Workers when I started a long time ago, and it was a program that this Milwaukee local wanted to initiate because of the long-standing Latino presence there in Milwaukee in their industry. And they asked me to come in and do some training, some adult education that we do from the School for Workers around the issue of the impact on Latinos, not just on the society at large, but specifically on their union, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And solidarity when we understand each other's historical position within the making of the labor union. And so this group of workers created what's called Latinos of Steel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we created this whole program around what is it to be a Latino worker that is part of a labor union in Milwaukee. What is that narrative, right? And where does it start? Where does it finish? You know, what centers it? And
Mm-hmm.
um, and so we created a Latinos in in labor timeline, and we
Labor what?
labor timeline, and we use this. Well, I use this to really talk about the presence of this group in organized labor going back
Mm-hmm.
100 years, right? And so that was one of the first opportunities that I got to engage in those conversations and to really begin to create this conscious narrative that Latinos have always been a part of
Mm-hmm.
labor in the U.S. and to
Right.
really own that conversation. And that when we look at organizers like Emma Tenayuko, when we look at organizations in New York or tobacco rollers, cigar rollers
Mm-hmm.
in Florida, that these legacies of labor that intersect with Latino populations have always been a part of
Right.
the narrative of
Right.
organized labor itself. And to extend that a little bit, is that Latino labor has always been a part of the working class, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so to try to have those conversations of working class, you cannot have a conversation about working class contributions to our country here without including the narratives of people of color, indigenous people, and women. And I think it's important that we have these types of conversations that celebrate those um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
include those stories of contribution and struggle as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I am now going to say, let's talk a little bit more about what they're up to in Wisconsin today. Uh, I seeing this that we agreed on this topic and this time frame. I'm like, oh my, this will be interesting. Um, so yeah, how about in today's economy here in
Yeah.
Wisconsin, the impact that these Latino workers are having? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So we all know that there's several industries and different occupations with the industries that are that are that have large numbers of Latino and
Mhm.
sometimes Latino immigrant workers. We can talk about the agriculture industry, of the food processing and manufacturing industries, the
Mhm.
hospitality and service industries, the construction industries, healthcare and caregiving industries, just to name a few, right?
Right.
That quite honestly operate and thrive because of a Latino workforce that's present there. We do understand, for example, that in agriculture, the majority of field work and on-farm jobs are done by mostly Latina workers. Where in Wisconsin dairy, our study showed, Alexia, that the vast majority of those on-farm workers, right, those workers that actually work directly with maintaining the infrastructure and working with the cows that produce the milk, the vast majority of those folks are more than likely Latino immigrant workers who are unauthorized, having unauthorized immigration status.
Yeah, we
So
did learn that. And we also learned how dangerous those jobs are and how not it's not just precarious based on their status, but also given the low wage nature of the work and the dangerous nature of the work.
yes, and to really think about the impacts that this workforce is having on on well, basically it's the backbone of Wisconsin's dairy industry, and it's a
Right.
$50 billion a year industry. That without this workforce in those jobs, there would the dairy industry would struggle to survive, meaning that it would have to recruit, it would have to address some of the reasons why people aren't applying for these jobs in vast numbers and so forth and so forth. And then we look at food processing, right? And manufacturing, light manufacturing, right? Where we
Right.
still kind of build stuff here. Um, and
Yeah.
so we see this in cities like Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, right? That they rely heavily on Latino labor in places like meat packing, cheese production. We just
Mhm.
recently saw a case in Monroe, Wisconsin, with with uh,
Mm.
with some workers that were on strike there because of some of the changes in other manufacturing sectors, right? And in his hospitality and service, we see Latino workers that are prominent in hotels, restaurants, cleaning services, landscaping. They're all low wage jobs with high demand roles. And let me be clear, you can go here where we call home in Madison, go to any restaurant, just listen to what the service workers, what the cooks are doing, what they're listening to. And more than likely, it's Spanish language media that you'll hear. It'll be Spanish language that you'll also hear in the back, in the kitchens, right?
Mhm.
So most of the food that we touch, even on that level, that sustains us, is handled by Latino, Latina, mostly Latino, Latina immigrant workers in construction, right? Those that build our homes, those that make our infrastructure of our state, of our society go. It's estimated that nationwide 14% of all construction workers have an unauthorized immigration status. 14%. This is the number of people that work in these industries that's estimated, right? And let me be clear, in my humble estimation, these are estimates are very low. And it's been proven over and again that it's difficult to get accurate estimates of populations that have that are in precarious situations because they don't want to participate in
Of
in
course.
census. So the census will tell you that it's between 3 and 5% of an undercount. There's some demographers out there that'll tell you it's about 15% of an undercount, which is a
Mhm.
substantially different number than 3 to 5%. But
Yeah. I, I also want to, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Please finish your
no,
thought.
no, no, no. I was going to say, but needless to say, the industries that I just outlined are important to the well-being of our social and economic structures in Wisconsin.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and as I'm listening to you, I mean, obviously, um, residents of Wisconsin receiving these services, receiving these products that are being manufactured, perhaps living or working in communities in which construction projects are being done and improving our infrastructure. We all benefit from that tremendously. But also, this workforce then is such a contributing factor to a healthy economy, right? They're pouring money into their communities. They're pouring their wage monies into, you know, making sure their kids have what they need and paying taxes and all of that, right? So they're definitely a strong force in our local economy, which I think is really important. I am concerned about this issue with data. And I was just thinking as you were talking about the agricultural workers, about how they have now canceled the agricultural labor survey, the USDA. And so, I mean, it's been very difficult to get this data and it's only going to be more difficult, right? And so I think that those that are studying the issues like yourself, rather than official government data is going to be even more important, right? Because that's going to be the best source of info. Um, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit just about like I'm trying to think, sorry, getting low on time. I mean, first and foremost, you did mention labor in, or you mentioned Latinos in labor. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about sort of current organizing and current support for one another and the impact or the importance of that.
Yeah. You know, there's been an interest in the last 10 years in organizing into labor unions because we're talking about labor unions and to have representation on the job. This idea of workplace democracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where folks have a say in the spaces where they exchange their labor for wages. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a resurgence under under the Biden administration for some at some point, and you would see that there was organizing that was taking place in different places across different industries across the country. There was a protection that was issued by the Biden administration that basically said if you're involved in a labor struggle or in the fight to create a labor union, then we will grant you protective status for the duration of this negotiation that you're having with the employer. We'll call it that. So we saw a resurgence of people that were no, especially people that were unauthorized and working, that decided that it was time to really exert those labor rights that they have, right? And you saw little pockets of workers organizing, and including here in Wisconsin. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with an organization for many years now. Their name is Voces de la Frontera. They're a labor and immigrants' rights organization, and who have been at the forefront of these movements for at least we're almost 2 decades now. Um, and under them, they have had several opportunities to work with workers that are organizing. I remember one back in the mid 2015 or something like that. No, it was earlier than that. It was called the Palermo's worker campaign, where these pizza maker workers in Milwaukee decided that they wanted a union. They organized. Most of them had precarious immigration statuses, so it was very difficult. We saw an increase of that in places like Green Bay, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Green Bay, where people were starting to get together and say, we need to get together and form our own unions to be able to protect ourselves, especially during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I want to just add that I think it's fascinating the organizing and solidarity that we see that's not necessarily
mm,
forming a new or joining a labor organization, although those cases, of course, warm my heart, and I think that's fantastic. Organizing together to be able to set terms and conditions of employment, but also organizing just to improve working conditions like they did down in Monroe, or to get their wages that they're owed and engage in actions, right? And
yeah,
so you see that the organizing and solidarity is really bringing power to power to the workers to be able to enforce some of these rights, which I think is really important. And that deferred action program you referenced, labor dispute is a pretty broad term, right?
yeah.
It doesn't mean joining, an AFL-CIO union. And so I think we've just seen a lot of interesting actions to enforce rights. Mhm.
Yeah. And you know, we that do engage in not just research but applied research and that work alongside with both government and nonprofit labor and non-labor unions, or labor unions and NGOs, understand that there is a basic premise that is rooted in labor rights for that can be used to respect the humanity of those workers, right? We know that the number one way to attack inequality in our country is through labor contracts,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
If we
Yep.
look at the gender wage gap, the ethnic wage gap, the race wage gaps, so and so and so and so.
Number one way. Yep,
Number one way
equalizer.
to attack that is through a contract, having a formal contract at your website. But I do want to get back real quickly, and I know Angela's going to cut us
Yeah.
off here soon, to the fact that there is lots of solidarity work that's taking place, not just in Madison, not just in Wisconsin,
Mhm.
across the country right now. Much of
Yeah.
that solidarity work is intersecting right now when we see an attack on working communities that's coming from the highest echelons of power in our country. And I'm speaking directly to the raids that are happening in working class communities. And I urge people to think about what that means as folks that are interested or are a part of labor, that the families, that the workers that are being targeted are also part of the ranks of the working class movement here in the U.S.
Right.
We expect this to escalate in the next year or so. These as ICE recruits and just fills up their ranks. We see this going to be happening more. So what we're doing is really we're going to be destabilizing local economies. We're going to be destabilizing family integration. We're going to family disintegration is going to be leading to the schools and just us as a society, I think, are going to really fall to the ills of this type of thinking that was just codified also by the U.S. Supreme Court, right?
Well, I want one comment on that. And Angela, I do know we're out of time. I don't know if we're set up to take any questions. So if there's anything anybody could write as a question before we sign off. But I just want to say to your last point, Armando, I think we all need to be standing up and paying attention. I think all of us in labor do need to have that solidarity for one another. It matters that, we have a court making decisions in which they are disregarding decades of precedents, suggesting that you can pick someone up as an immigration officer based on ethnicity, based on what kind of work they do, based on the color of their skin, and even speaking English with an accent. Okay. So, in my legal training, in my reading of all the prior precedent, that violates the Fourth Amendment. That's an unlawful search and seizure. And so we all need to pay attention because there's a challenge on these rights, and the rule of law and the law is changing. The rule of law is not what it really used to mean. So this is a fight of the working class, life, absolutely, and not one just of any particular community. Although I'm thrilled to be able to celebrate and recognize one specific community here in Hispanic Heritage Month. So that's wonderful. Um, and with that, I think I don't see anything about Q&A or comments. And I think that we have to end it on this. I'll let you have the last word, but thank you for sharing all of these thoughts and for celebrating these important residents of Wisconsin.
No, thank you, Alexia, and the School for Workers, and anybody that's joining us today. And we look forward to celebrating with you our hundredth
Yes.
anniversary, and to continue to work on some of the issues that impact and affect the working class of Wisconsin.
Yeah, good point. Please visit our website on the event, the symposium on Friday, and we hope to see some of you there. Thanks very much. Take care.